This is a test. Can you guys hear me okay? There seems to be a pretty long delay over here. But figured I'd give this a try. Definitely don't like how long of a delay this is going. This is a test. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. Now, there seems to be about a minute's long delay between when I do something and when it shows up. I'm still trying to see exactly how long. It doesn't look like a problem with Coders TV. It's definitely not a problem on my side. YouTube Live, where I'm also doing this, shows that it looks like it's probably in the change from here to Google Hangouts. So we'll just sit back, we'll sit tight, and as soon as 8 o'clock rolls around, we'll get started. If you have any questions, go ahead, start preparing them, put them into the chat. Let me know what you want me to cover, and I'll talk about whatever. Please ignore the support me with 299 bit on the left there. Obviously, you guys are my Kaplan students are supporting me in other ways, so please don't. I can't get rid of that button; it just appears there. So. Yeah, right. Looks like it's about 8 o'clock, so I'll go ahead and get started. Yeah, so if you guys have questions, go ahead, put it in the chat. Like I said, there's a pretty good long delay between when something actually happens on my side and when it appears for you guys. So just let me know. We'll get started. My plan is to just start talking really about Alice, start going over Alice, start covering some of that stuff, explaining some of the basics starting from the ground up. But if you guys have any other questions or anything else that you want me to cover in particular, just let me know. If it's events, if it's functions, methods, parameters, whatever. This is an experiment. I've never used Coders TV. It was recommended to me by a friend, so I figured I'd give it a shot. Trying to decide what I was going to actually do on it. I'm like, well, let's see if I could use it for something actually productive. So, all right. Well, so what is Alice? Alice is a programming environment designed specifically to help new users learn how to program, people that have never really programmed before. If you have a lot of experience working with programming languages, you have some experience in PHP or Python, it's probably a little below that level. It's more like the likes of Scratch, and some of those online JavaScript environments where you can drag and drop your code around, which is exactly what you're going to be doing in Alice. Alice is Java-based. It's there so that anyone can... Oh, sorry, I just got a weird flash on that. It's there where you can just download it, you can run it, you can save your scenes. It's not really designed for a really great animation. It's not designed for perfect realism. It's more there so that you can learn the basic concepts of programming, take those concepts and apply them into another language. I use the analogy of a kazoo, right? When you're a kid or you're in school, whatever, and you're learning the kazoo, well, you're not learning so that you can become a great kazoo player, because no one wants to hear a kazoo all day. What you're doing is you're learning the skills that will help you eventually become a better programmer, become a better coder. So that's what Alice is there for. That's kind of the goal. Again, I'm going to just start from the very basics and go forward. If there are any questions, please put them over in the chat. I'm looking over in the chat. I don't see anyone saying anything, but I do see that I've got some people watching. So that is a good thing, I suppose. All right, so let me start sharing Alice, and we can start talking about what that actually means. All right, so Alice. Alice is a pretty simple, bare bones environment. If you want to get started and you don't have Alice already, you'll want to head over to alice.org, and you can just download the Alice code file or the Alice package, unzip it, and you can start running it. So essentially, the main layout is really where you're going to be doing most of your work. You're going to be doing your coding. You've got this yellow tab here, which contains all the code that you'll drag and drop. This is where you're going to do most of your editing, most of your work. Right above it in this area that's blue and green, that's kind of a preview of the world that you're building. In fact, if you hit play, you'll see that what your actual world looks like will be run. So this is going to take all the work that you did, all the objects you put in, all the code that you put in, and actually run it usually from top to bottom. But as you get more advanced in Alice, you'll definitely get a better understanding and appreciation of how you can control the flow of the program, right? So in Alice, the way that you basically interact with everything is, I just realized that when I did that share, I wasn't sharing everything, so you didn't see the actual scene run. So it's right there. The basic premise behind Alice is that when you are working in Alice, you're interacting with these objects. You are giving commands to objects and having those objects do things. Objects can be thought of like nouns. You can think of them as, animals or people. They're the things that you actually tell what to do. They're like, you're a director and they're puppeteers. When you start dealing with giving those actual commands, the way that works is you're using methods. And those methods actually give the commands. The methods are like the actions. And in Alice, almost everything is drag and drop. So if I wanted to add an object to my scene, for example, I wanted to have an object on my scene that I could tell it to do things, I can hit add objects, and the layout's going to change a little bit. You're going to have a closer view of the scene, and all of the different classes and objects that you can interact with will be listed down at the bottom. So if you're just scrolling around in here, you can see that Alice comes prepackaged with a whole bunch of different objects that you can interact with. So for example, if I wanted to, let's see, I don't know what I want to play with. Maybe I'll grab something in the spooky category, and we'll go with, maybe we'll go with a zombie. Why not, right? I've got a zombie here. And you'll notice that as soon as I drag and dropped it onto the scene, I've got a new entry over here on my Alice world. And if I click on it, you'll see that my zombie gets surrounded in this yellow box that shows the bounds, the location of the zombie on the scene. So with this zombie, I can drag it and drop it and put it wherever I'd like, but it's still going to appear over here in my object tree. This list of objects over here that starts with world at the top is the object tree. It's all of the objects that you've actually put onto your scene. So once I've got my scene set up basically how I like it, I can hit done over here. And I'm going to go back to my code view. My object tree remains the same. And my methods, if I click on the zombie right here, my this little properties, methods, and function tabs, this panel down here will, can you make new objects? Absolutely. So there's two ways to make new objects. You can either extend an existing object. So if I wanted to create my own special like zombie type, I could put that in there. But if I wanted to create a brand new thing, you'd have to actually give the textures, you'd have to actually give the layout, the models, and that's a lot more in depth. There's tutorials available for that on YouTube. It's not as easy as you would think, but you can definitely do that if you're comfortable with 3D art and with 3D modeling. But if you just wanted to have a zombie that was a little different than other zombies, that's as easy as tweaking it over here in the properties and methods, right-clicking on it and choosing Save Object, and that'll give you your an A2C file. That is essentially how Alice handles inheritance, if you're familiar with that concept from other languages or courses. So, but back to my zombie. Now that I've got my zombie in the object tree, I can make him do whatever I want. I can use these built-in methods. And remember, methods are just actions. They're verbs. They're commands that you can give to your objects. So if I put my zombie here and I say move up 5 meters, move down 5 meters, If I hit play, my zombie's going to go up and he's going to come back down, and then it's going to stop. When you hit play, Alice is going to go through a few steps. First, it's going to come up to this event section, and we'll talk about events in a little bit. But the event section has one event in it by default. And that is just saying, hey, when the world starts, I want you to do something. Namely, I want you to run the code that's found in this method, this world my first method. Well, this world my first method, you'll notice also matches the name of this tab down here. If we click on the world object, you'll see that it's a method right here. So what happens is when you hit play, Alice starts up your scene and says, okay, what do you want me to do when the world starts? Well, when the world starts, I want you to do the code that's in world my first method, which is down here and over here. If you hit edit here, you'll notice that nothing happens. If I accidentally close this and it's all yellow, I can click on this world object, click on the my first method, hit edit, and I'm right back to that code. So that's the general flow of what happens when you hit play. Now, in this case, when I hit play, it said run the world my first method. When we got into world my first method, I only have two code statements in here. I have move up 5 meters and move down 5 meters. All right, so I say move up, move down, move up, move down, right? It's only going to happen once. If I hit play again, you'll see that he goes up, he comes back down, and it ends. It's just stopped. Nothing else is going to happen because I didn't tell Alice to do anything else. Alice is just going to sit here waiting until I end the scene. I can also hit restart, and it'll go through the whole process again. And that is the very basics of Alice. Almost everything you do on that that's a little more advanced will be built upon that general flow. You add objects to a scene. You set up the code to give those objects commands. You hit play and test your code. Now, obviously, if this was all you could do, then it'd be pretty boring, right? If all you can do is just drag and drop things into this world my first method, it would be a pretty boring application. You wouldn't actually learn much. But let's add, I don't know, let's put a skeleton on my scene as well. Let's imagine that I want them to dance in some way, right? So let's clear out my code. I just right click and choose delete. If I wanted them both to dance, I could, click on one of my objects, my zombie or my skeleton, and drag the code over one by one, right? I could say, all right, skeleton move up 1 meter, skeleton move down 1 meter. But if I wanted them both to do the exact same animations, what I would have to do is I'd have to bring everything over for the skeleton, click on the zombie, bring everything over for the zombie, make sure that, I use a do together block, because by default, Alice is going to run everything top to bottom. But if you put it in a do together block, it'll run them at the same time. And I could go this way, but the problem becomes that this is error prone. If I say move down 1 meter and then grab the skeleton and I want him to move down, if I accidentally click on 0.5 meter and run this, well, I have a logic error. I wanted my skeleton to go all the way down, but he didn't. So really what I want to do is I want to break out this code so that it's easier to maintain. And to do that, I'm going to create a custom world method. There are two types of methods. There are the built-in methods, and those are the methods that come with an object by default. And these are the things that appear under the create new method button when you select an object. And then there's custom methods. And those are methods that you create. Remember, methods are just groups of commands that you can call, that you can give action to, that you can use within your code. And one really helpful concept within programming is encapsulation, which is just a fancy way of saying I'm going to take all of the data, all the code, all the functionality that I need and put it into a nice tight package that is very self-contained. So if I wanted to have my monsters dance in this case, what I would want to do is first get rid of this code in world, my first method, and I'd have to think, what type of method do I want? There are within custom methods, there's two types of methods that you can call. There are world methods and object methods. World methods allow you to pass in data so that any object on the scene can really use that method. Conversely, object level methods can only be used by the object they're created on. So for example, if I create a dance method on that's an object level method on my zombie, only my zombie would be able to dance. But if I create that dance method on my world, then I'll be able to use that for both my zombie and my skeleton. So what I'm going to do now is click on my world object. I'm going to hit create new method. I'm going to call it monster dance because I am not creative at all. So this monster dance method, you'll notice that with my world object selected, I now have this new method above create new method. If I click on skeleton and zombie, neither of them have that method, right? It's only on this world. Because Alice is drag and drop and it tries to prevent as many different syntax errors as possible, what you have to do is you have to pretty much lay out what is equivalent to like a template and then replace the values. All right. So what does that mean? Well, if I wanted my dance, I'm going to use a comment to explain this. A comment is just something that's completely ignored by the coding environment. They're helpful for notes to yourself or to other programmers that might be using your code in the future. It's good practice and good habit to really get into writing lots of comments so that you can always remember why you did something a certain way. So with this comment, I'm just going to say, okay, dancing should have the monster move up, turn around, move down. So it's pretty straightforward. They're just going to move up, they're going to move down, or they're going to move up, they're going to spin around, and they're going to move down. And what's going to happen now is I need to give Alice the basic flow of that, right? So I'm going to start with my zombie here. And just like before, I'm going to have my zombie move up 1 meter, move down 1 meter. And then I'm going to drag this turn right in between them and have them turn left, quarter revolution. Now, you'll notice that when you put the code into this World Monster Dance section, you've got these gray blocks here. These gray blocks represent parameters. They represent things that can be replaced. By default, the reason I used the zombie, and I could have used skeleton just as easily, but I had to use something that was there that wouldn't cause a syntax error, right? Can't tell nothing to move up. So I had to, by default, put something in there. But if I come over to World My First Method and I drag over this monster dance method and I hit run, what's going to happen is when the world starts, we're going to run all the code in World My First Method. So we come to World My First Method, and the code that gets called now is World Monster Dance. So it goes into the Monster Dance method. When I come over to the Monster Dance method, it's telling me the zombie should move up, should turn left, and then move down. If I hit play, you'll see that the zombie goes up and comes back down. Now, obviously, I said that I wanted the skeleton to do the same thing. Now, I could come over here and say, all right, skeleton move up 1 meter, but that would really defeat the purpose, right? All I did, if I went with this approach, I would have just moved the same exact problem from this method into a different method. Really what I want is I want a way to be able to replace whatever's in this gray block when I call the method over here. In other words, when I drag the world.monsterdance method onto World My First Method, I want it to ask, who are you trying to have dance? So that I can say, okay, have the skeleton dance, and now have the zombie dance. So I'm going to delete this. The way you handle that is create new parameter. When you click on create new parameter, it's going to ask you for a name of that parameter and the data type. We'll talk about data types a little later. But the big key here is that we've talked about how the skeleton and the zombie are objects. So I'm going to say who dance. So the way that you can think about this is that the parameter represents a placeholder. And you can substitute whatever object you want into that placeholder. So if I hit OK, you'll notice that I have a Who Should Dance entry up here next to the method name, and it says OBJ right next to it. That stands for object. So you know that you can use this wherever an object appears in your code. So now I'm going to drag this Who Should Dance parameter and drop it right on top of where it says skeleton, right on top of where it says zombie. So now the way that this method can be read is that whoever is passed in as Who Should Dance should move up 1 meter, turn left, and move down. But still, how do I set the value for Who Should Dance? Well, luckily now, if I come over to the world and I drag this monster dance method over, you'll notice that I have this little light yellow box that says Who Should Dance. Well, when I drop this into the world my first method, it's going to ask me what value I should put in for Who Should Dance. So if I drag this over, drop it, it says Who Should Dance. Well, Who should dance? We'll say the entire zombie. If I drop it again, I could say, all right, the entire skeleton. So now, just following the flow, when I hit play, Alice is going to run the code in world my first method, comes down here and it says, all right, run the code in world monster dance, setting Who Should Dance to zombie. So if I come over to monster dance, wherever we see Who Should Dance will be equal to zombie. So it's going to have the zombie move up, the zombie's going to turn, and the zombie's going to move down. Same thing. Once that's done, it's going to come back and it's going to call monster dance again, this time setting Who Should Dance to the skeleton. So then it can be read as the skeleton should move up, skeleton should turn left, and the skeleton should move down. So if I hit play, you'll see that my zombie comes up, turns around, comes down. My skeleton comes up, spins, comes down. Now I can make this animation a little better. If I wanted them to spin while jumping, I could come up here and say do together. What's going to happen is do together is going to run the code at the same time. Really what I want to have is I want him to spin halfway as he's coming up and halfway as he's coming down. So I'm going to grab the skeleton again, tell the skeleton to turn left a half a revolution, and just replace skeleton with this parameter. Now, when I run this code, you'll notice that because I changed it in this monster dance, it's going to affect both of the objects exactly the same, right? Because I only had to change it in one place. If I originally had to do my code like I showed in the beginning, where I had to put everything in world my first method, I would have had to change it in multiple places, which could definitely lead to bugs. So by putting it into this monster dance method, I can simply change it in one place and it'll affect everywhere. So now if I hit play, you'll see that he'll spin as he comes up and spin as he comes back down. Right? And if I wanted them to both go at the same time, I'll just grab this do together block down here, drop it up here, and there we go. So now, if I hit play, what's going to happen is the world is going to start and is going to trigger the world my first method event. It's going to come over here. It's going to say, all right, call monster dance with Who Should Dance set to zombie, and then call it with Who Should Dance set to skeleton, and run those at the exact same time. So now both of my monsters are going to jump up and spin at the same time. If I wanted them to do that a couple times, I could use the concept of a loop. If I wanted them to, for example, jump up and spin 3 times in a row, I could bring this do together in 3 times and drag this world over, click on the world, drag over this monster dance, set it to skeleton, monster dance, set it to zombie, right? But that's really, if you're having to repeat the same code over and over, generally there's a better way of approaching it. And in Alice, you can use this loop command down here. This loop command allows you to specify an exact number of times you want something to happen. So I'm going to drag this loop up here, and I'm going to say loop, we'll say other 3 times. I'll just drag this down there. And now my monsters are going to jump up and down and spin 3 times. Again, they're going to stop, and that's going to end the world because once this loop has happened 3 times, goes right underneath and breaks outside of the loop. So within the span of 20 minutes, we've talked about a few different concepts that I just kind of want to reiterate. And again, if you have any specific questions, definitely go ahead and put them in the chat. Let me know if there's anything else you want me to cover. I did only allocate about 30 minutes because I do have another class that I have to teach this evening. But we do have a little bit of time left. But to reiterate, we talked about how in Alice, the basic flow is that you have objects and you give those objects commands using methods. Objects are like nouns, they're things. And the scene that we just built, the skeleton and the zombie are both objects. I used methods to tell my objects what to do. And I talked about how there are two different types of methods. There are world level methods, which allow you to use the same method for multiple objects. And then something we didn't cover in this video is the object level methods, in which they're methods that only that object can call. We talked very briefly about events, which is specifically when the world starts, what should I do? And in this case, we said when the world starts, I should have this world my first method called. We talked about looping very basically, in that I said, hey, if I need to repeat something multiple times, I can use this loop command and say, hey, do everything in this blue box however many times. I also talked about parameters. In this custom method on the world, this world level method that I created an object parameter called who should dance. And I can use that wherever in my code I see a gray box that holds an object. If I wanted to also be able to say, okay, maybe I want the zombie to go up 1 meter and the skeleton to go up 2 meters, and I wanted to still use everything else to be the same, so I still wanted to use the rest of this code. If all I wanted to do was change this value that's in this 1 meter block right here, I could create a new parameter, and I can say how high, and we'll give it a number value. And now I can just drag this and drop it on top of wherever I see that little yellow box, the yellow box that's surrounding the gray box, okay? So now if I come back over to world my first method, you'll notice that by default, Alice gave how high a value of 1. So if I want my zombie to go up 2 meters, I just hit this down arrow and said how high to 2. My skeleton will go 1. It'll still use the same exact code. The only difference is I'm able to change some of the basic characteristics of that method at when I actually want to. So now if I hit play, you'll see that the zombie is going to go higher than the skeleton 3 times. All right. I was still able to use this because I used a parameter here. I'm still able to use the same basic functionality and tweak it just a little bit with the parameter of a number type and just drag that in. All right. I guess another thing that I could show you is the say command. So let's say that I wanted them to jump up and I wanted them to say, I don't know, because I'm not creative, we'll say boo, right? So what we'll do is I'll click on my zombie. And remember, Alice wants to prevent you from making any syntax errors. So you have to start with just, a basic outline, and then you can replace the data. So in other words, I have to start with like maybe the zombie or the skeleton with the say, drag it over, and it's going to ask me what do I want my zombie, or what do I want the object to say. Hello and goodbye are the basics there, but we're going to hit other, and we can type in a string. Now, why the term string? For the purposes of Alice, you can just assume that a string is text. It comes from the days in other programming languages where there wasn't really the concept of text. There were just single characters, and you would string those characters together to make words, sentences, paragraphs, etc. So that's why the term string is used throughout computer science. You'll want to, for many cases, you can just think of it as text. So enter some basic text. I'll say boo. And again, by default, it says zombie. I just want to replace that with who should dance. And again, now my parameter doesn't really make sense because it's not just who should dance, right? Because they're also saying something. And we could maybe call this monster. We'll just change it here by right-clicking. You'll notice that Alice will take care of renaming it everywhere for you. So now if I hit play, they'll come up, they'll say boo, and they'll come back down. They'll go up, say boo, come back down. Let me make this a little bigger. All right, and then come back down. All right, great. Now, what if I wanted them to say something different? Maybe I want the zombie to say brains and the skeleton to continue to say boo. Well, we essentially already know the answer to this. We had talked about how if I want to use the same basic code with just a minor tweak, I could probably use a parameter. So I'll hit create new parameter, and this is going to be an other string, right? Because I said that string represents text. So I'm going to call this say what. Now I can drag this text parameter of say what. Notice how it says ABC, so you know that it's text, and drag it right there. If I come over roll my first method, it's going to say what as a default string because Alice doesn't know what you want your default string to be. So we can just change it to whatever. So for the zombie, maybe the zombie will say brains. And for the skeleton, we'll just have him say boo. All right, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I hit play, they come up, brains, they come back down. Up, brains, come back down. So again, parameters allow you to customize your methods so that you can reuse a lot of the same code without the need to completely rewrite your method. You wouldn't want to create 1,000 different methods for how high you want someone to move or how far forward you want someone to move. You want to be able to use the basic move method and tweak that method with the parameters. All right, I do have to get going because I do have another class I have to get to. But were there any other questions or anything before I end this little screen share Google Hangout? I know that there's a pretty good delay, so I'll just sit tight for a minute. Otherwise, I think you guys are coming to this experiment with Coders TV. Definitely let me know what you thought, of the quality of the format. I'm not entirely set on where I'm going to be doing these, but I am going to start streaming a lot more. So whether it makes sense to stay here or just do a Google Hangout, time will tell. So I do appreciate everybody coming. Let me stop sharing my screen, and I will just sit here and see if you guys have any other questions before I pop out and start getting ready to teach my next class. All right, I'm not seeing any questions or anything. Again, thanks for coming by, and I will definitely get in touch with me if you need to. All right, follow me on Coders TV. Most of you probably have my email address anyway, so let me know what I can do to help. Take care, and thanks for coming by this evening.